Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Monday, August 11th, 2025, and today we are talking about that time I almost moved to France to become a winemaker, water storage done safely, and is your garden really lost? Maybe not so fast, so let's do it. All right, I hope everyone's Monday is off to a nice start. I hope you all had lovely weekends. We had another hot weekend, but it was nice. The family is starting a bit of a tradition now of taking to some hiking trails in the area in Kentucky and did another one up in Frankfurt this weekend. I used to hike all of the time as a kid with my mom, so it's nice to kind of come full circle on that activity with my own kiddos. Also, I got another round of my pollinator melons juice, those being the melons that you have to grow to get seedless melons, but they themselves are full of a ridiculous amount of seeds, but also a ridiculous amount of juice. They're not quite as tasty as your average melon, but they make nice juice. So I'm going to keep rolling with that. And my winter is going to be quite tastier for that work. Also wanted to give a shout to Patreon member Joe Naaman Sessions for his suggestion on this week's 20-second videos. Joe says it's summer. Maybe we show some fails as well. Quote, how about a tour of that wreck of a tool shed? Got a weedy patch that you can't bring yourself to deal with? Ran over your irrigation line with your flail mower? Let's see some epic fails and be proud of them, because each and every one of us is trying our darndest. And maybe, just maybe, if we acknowledge those things gone wrong by putting them out in the world, it will spur us to deal with it once and for all, end quote. And I love that. And I would add that sometimes when it looks like everyone is succeeding around you, it's good to know that people are also having fails too, to keep your successes and failures in context. We live in this like over Instagrammed, over curated world where we think everybody's succeeding. That's not the case. Everybody has some failures. So your 20-second clip challenge this week is to send a quick video clip with a fail to farmermike@no-tillgrowers.com. It can include a success too. I think that's fair, but don't be afraid to point the camera at a patch of weeds and say somewhere in there is carrots. Especially you really pro farmers, show the newest farmers that it happens to the best of us, because we've all been there. And I think it's helpful for people to know that.
Like this. Everything out here is rocking and rolling, doing really well, and then I have this whole tunnel that I've completely neglected for 3 months. Hi, tunnel. I'll be back soon.
And last, because I can't help myself, there is an NTG Premier League Fantasy League group for you soccer nerds to join and play along with me this winter. I will link that in the show notes and send a Victor a hat or something. I mean, yeah, I could always use another hat. See what I did there? All right, so farming stuff. I was thumbing through the forum recently at no-tillgrowers.com, and I came across this great little thread over there on recovering a garden late in the summer for fall planting. I think it was from a user named Dilly Bars, so shouts to them. And they were trying to recover a garden late in the summer for fall planting. Like I'm sure happened to at least a few of you this year, their gardens had kind of been neglected, in this case by the previous owners for health reasons, and things that are not crops have taken over. It happens, but what can you do? What can be done about it? Well, you can go through that thread and they talk about how they handled it, but there is no one right way to tackle this issue. And the issue may in fact persist for several years in terms of any weed seeds being put down. But let's just take a generic overgrown garden and what some of the options are if that happens. First, if there are beds and such that were originally nicely shaped under those weeds, then it may be worth preserving those beds. I mean, if nothing else, the weeds can tell you that at least something can and has been grown there, which is, even if not the plants that you want, a good thing, because plants are generally good for enriching the soil. So if that's the case and you are good with the general layout of the garden and want to preserve that and not do a whole bunch more soil disturbance, then start with simply mowing it all down. Next, if you do typically want to or do utilize large black plastic tarps and there are still some warm weeks left in your season, you can either soak the area with water and then cover the residue with the tarps, or rake the residue into the pathways and soak the area and then cover it. The difference between raking off the residue and leaving it would be that the residue will make planting into that area harder later on if you were trying to reclaim it for any semblance of a fall garden. If you were not worried about using that area until the spring, then raking off the residue won't be necessary, and you can just leave it on the top of those beds and then tarp it until the spring if you wanted to, just to kind of get rid of as many weeds as you possibly can. You can also add a layer of compost over top after the tarping and then plant directly into it this fall if you have access to that much compost. Or if you don't want to go the plastic tarp route, mowing and then a heavy layer of mulch can do the trick, depending on what weeds we are talking about here. I might recommend, like a mulch paper put down, and then you cover that in a layer of compost or even a heavy layer of straw if you have that. Though straw will take longer to break down than the compost, which you can plant pretty much directly into, but that will just kind of block all the weeds that you need to block. Hay will bring in more weed seeds, and although there are uses for hay, do watch our mulch video first before using hay as a mulch or straw as a mulch or compost as a mulch. It's just not a bad idea to watch it no matter what. Also worth noting is that if it's incredibly overgrown, this garden space, and you are not in love with the layout anyway, it's okay to just look at it as a new piece of ground that is going to be formed into a garden for the very first time, because a lot of the same issues will be there to deal with. I talk a lot about preparing gardens and starting gardens in the Living Soil Handbook and throughout this channel, frankly, but you would essentially mow it down, get a soil test, add any compost or amendments that you might want or that are recommended, and then till those in, shape your beds, and then never have to till them again, so long as you keep up with the weeds. Indeed, sometimes that is the right way to start a garden, and it's the best way to get it off on the right foot. Like I often say, it's not one step back and 2 steps forward. It's one step back to never have to take another step back again. Anyway, read through that thread because there are lots of little tidbits that others have put in there. And don't forget to just always cruise over to that forum with your questions at no-tillgrowers.com. Let me know your thoughts or experiences reclaiming gardens. Some of you might be in the process now of doing such, in which case I smell a 20-second video that you should send to Farmer Mike at no-tillgrowers.com. Otherwise, up next, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, water storage. BRB.
Front yard garden here in Mobile, Alabama, Zone 9A, where we're growing lots of winter squash, bush and pole lima beans, 3 types of okra, Murasaki sweet potatoes. The clay peas are absolutely killing it. We decided to also grow some tiger melons alongside wing beans.
Today's episode is brought to you by Farmhand. We know it's peak season, you're busy, but the messages you send now are what drive renewals later. That's why Farmhand is offering free, instant access to their farmer-built newsletter builder. No demos, no setup fees, just drop your logo, upload your list, and start sending farm-branded emails that boost sales, engage members, and save you hours each week. Get free access today at farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Sebastian Couper, who writes, quote, "Hello, fellow no-till growers. I'm extending my home garden this year from 20 to 60 meters squared. That would be 200 to 600 square feet. I could go a bit bigger, but I'm still learning a lot from your work in the Living Soil Handbook, so I don't need to rush it. Zone 7B in Northeast France. And just like a large amount of countries here in Europe, we are going through a pretty dry summer. Those drought episodes will inevitably become more frequent and more intense in the future. Sadly, the generated water stress is slowly killing a lot of native trees in Europe, but I guess it's the same for all of us. As I extend my garden, I will also have to extend my rainwater storage. The idea of having a big rainwater storage makes me a bit uncomfortable, as I don't know a lot about anaerobic bacteria, fungus, pathogens, parasites, etc., living 100% submerged. Could you elaborate on this subject? Are water filters even a necessity when it comes to rainwater? Appreciate all the hard work you do. Much love from France." End quote. All right, Sebastian, great question here, and sorry about the drought. What a bummer. I also saw there was massive wildfires in southern France recently, so hoping all of our French growers are good over there. Sorry that you all are going through that. This is brutal. All right, so in terms of water storage, some of what you need to do will depend on how you want to use the water. For instance, if you're just looking to use this for irrigation and it's going directly onto the soil and not being sprayed onto the plants, then you won't need any sort of purification system, really. I mean, it's not a bad idea just to reduce the potential for pathogens, but it's less necessary if it's going straight to the soil. If you plan to wash the produce with the stored water or drink the stored water, then that's going to require some filtration, or at least that's just ideal. But anyway, the first thing you do have to look at are any local laws in regards to water storage. I think that's probably a good place to start. I don't know what said things are there in northern France, or for that matter, in most other states than my own, or even counties. It can vary by county and sometimes by neighborhood if you have an HOA. But anyway, so you will have to just make sure there are no standards you have to meet to save your own water. Second, the tank needs to be opaque, meaning you cannot see through it. It doesn't have to be black. It could be whatever color, you just can't see through it, which will limit the growth of algae and certain bacteria. Next, filtration for the water coming into the tank is not a bad idea in terms of sediment. Some folks will install water purifying systems and or first flush diverters, which basically discard the first flush of water to reduce contamination. Like the first flush of water coming in, it just basically lets that go, and then it starts allowing the rest. And it does that at the inlet where the water comes into the tank to treat the water before it enters the tank effectively. If you watched the video I did with Sage Hill Ranch Gardens on their storage tanks for their wash water there in California, they have a system that filters out the lettuce and debris that's coming from their wash tanks before it enters their main storage tank. I will link that in the show notes so you can get a better idea of what exactly that looks like, because it is very cool design and very helpful in the situation where water is expensive and they don't get a lot of it. There are also very simple designs that essentially slow the water down as it comes into the tank and basically like drop the sediment, or also charcoal filters and sand filters as well that you can build yourself for relatively cheap. You will need to clean that tank out at least once a year, which is a good thing to do headed into the winter, because you don't want the tanks to be, to freeze and thus break. But you do want to clean those out just to keep any grime, muck from building up. Alternatively, you can look into things like cisterns that are underground and may require a little less maintenance, or even ponds for irrigation, which utilize plants that help on the water filtration side of things. It is also worth looking at some of the cool and simple innovations around the world, like that have been around for a long time, like the Tonka tanks, T-A-A-N-K tanks in India. I just recently watched a video by Andrew Millison that I'll link in the show notes, and the latter half of that is all about these simple cement rain collection tanks that they use there in really, really dry areas of India, but they're kind of halfway dug in the ground. They're also cement, so that could be a lot of money. But of course, with digging also comes more regulation, and at that point, you may just be getting closer to the price of simply digging a well, which it sounds like may not be the worst idea in your situation and evolving environment there. If you do go with the above ground tank, make sure you have a lid on it to prevent frogs from taking up residence there. There's a good study on rain barrel collection from Rutgers that looks at heavy metals and E. coli and found that the rain barrels they studied had low levels of each, in fact, but gives some important guidelines on how to manage and deliver the water. I will link that in the show notes so you can kind of thumb through. It's a really simplified version of a study and easy to follow. In short, most rainwater collection, if done in relatively airtight, opaque containers, will be fine for garden use so long as it does not directly touch the plants, or at least the edible parts of the plants, but also be working on long-term storage solutions for your property as well, such as a well, cisterns, ponds, or preferably a couple of those, whatever makes sense for you. Anyway, I hope there is something helpful in there, and I'm sure our commenters will add their experiences with rainwater collection in the show notes. What has worked for you all and what hasn't? Be good to hear about that. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will actually tell a story involving France in French, because pourquoi pas? Be right back.
Hey nerds, this is Lee from North Carolina, first year market gardening, here to issue a warning. If you read the Living Soil Handbook and listen to Farmer Jesse and the Growers Daily podcast, this is what happens. Be warned and take care, and happy growing, folks.
Farmer Claire Coleman here from the Winter Growers Podcast. Did you know that I also founded Real Farmer Care, a nonprofit that supports farmer well-being? From my own experiences farming, I knew firsthand that this type of support was missing from ag, so I decided to do something about it. As of today, there are over 500 farmer recipients of a $100 self-care award, with more applying daily. If you'd like to help, each $100 donated supports one new farmer. Visit realfarmercare.com to donate and learn more. Again, that's realfarmercare.com.
All right, as promised on Friday, it's story time. Almost 20 years ago now, I was working in wine retail in New York City, and although I liked the job and I loved the people I worked with, I also knew I didn't want to do it forever. At the same time, I was starting to visit winemakers, and as you will recall from another recent story time, I met a winemaker who was really eye-opening to me, Bertrand Gouthreau of Vouette and Sorbet in the Champagne region of France. Inspired by that meeting and meetings with other winemakers obsessed with their soils, I sort of decided that maybe I wanted to move to France and learn to be a grower and winemaker, or vigneron, as they say. So for about 3 years, I studied French at the Alliance Française in New York City in preparation to move to France and learn to make wine. Now, I did not learn a second language as a kid, not French, not Spanish, nothing. In high school, I took Latin, but honestly, mostly just because Latin club was the funnest club and the nerdiest of the clubs, but not because I was very good at Latin or ever really got good at Latin. I cannot, for the record, speak any Latin. So learning French later in life became quite a job, and I studied hard and worked hard at it so that I could one day keep up when I moved to France. But also, after a few years, I was debating how much I actually wanted to live in France. It was going to be complicated to get the visa. It was going to be difficult to learn as much as I wanted to, not being a native speaker. My mental health at the time, honestly, was probably the biggest factor because it was pretty suboptimal, if I'm putting it kindly. And I frankly just kind of missed my home state of Kentucky. And then one day I was at a party hosted by a wine importer I knew, shouts to Jenny and Francois, talking to an innovative American winemaker named Tony Couturi, who just somewhat offhandedly happened to say, it doesn't have to be grapes. You could make wine out of pretty much anything. And it just kind of clicked that I didn't have to move to France to learn to make wine. I could move back to Kentucky, get a job on a farm, and learn to make wine on my own out of whatever fruits I could grow. And so that's what I did. Sort of. I applied for an internship on a farm, Bug Tussle Farm, and that first year got a few books on fermentation, shouts to Sandra Katz, and my mentors even helped me to learn to make various fruit wines from things like wild blackberries and wild persimmons that were outstanding wines, to be honest. And I also learned to make wines from a few other things like pawpaws that were admittedly less outstanding due, I believe, to their lack of citric acid, but that's for a different story. Ultimately, I never moved to France and also never started the fruit winery I thought it would, and part of that, I believe, is because I also knew somewhere in the back of my mind that I would one day quit drinking. So I'm kind of glad I didn't go that route. It would be quite awkward now. Awkward. So even though I never use the French I learned, really, save for the occasional pronunciation of a name or word, and my skills with it are largely gone. Like I struggle to follow a basic French conversation anymore these days because there's not a lot of French spoken here in rural Kentucky. But I have absolutely no regrets about any of that. I think back to the various conversations I got to have with so many different French winemakers that helped me understand their enthusiasm for the soil, the climate, the terroir, as they say. It basically helped plant the farming bug in me. So anyway, even though I don't really use my French now, I still highly recommend learning a new language. It can not only give you new insights into new cultures and challenge your brain, but it could very well change your entire life, like it did mine. So that's fun. Anyway, I think I'm going to wrap it there. How has a second or possibly third language changed your world? I'd love to hear. Who knows? Maybe my French will come in handy one day if we ever get a chance to start No-Till Growers Europe. Un petit rêve. Otherwise, Later Days Monday. Don't forget, No-Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. You can learn about how to do that in the show notes. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat, I got my corduroy on today, or a copy of the Living Soil Handbook at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of August, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Lisa Burton, Barry Kaufman, and Dylan Howell. Awesome, you all. Thank you. All right, so let's kick off this week's story. Let's make it about, I think we should make a story about a plumber. Not enough stories about plumbers, and definitely not enough stories about plumbers like this one. Zeke, the plumber, got into plumbing for one reason and one reason only: money. When Zeke was young, Zeke's mom had hired a plumber, and the man was at their house for a very short time fixing a clog, and when he left, Zeke saw his mom hand that guy a wad of cash like he'd never seen before. Zeke thought, people pay you to pull hair out of a drain? So anyway, Zeke never wanted to be anything else but a plumber. Zeke started apprenticing at a young age, and by the time Zeke was 18, was working full-time as a plumber and making thousands of dollars a week and loving it, frankly, pulling hair for money. And of course, fixing pipes and all the other complicated stuff. But anyway, one day, Zeke got a call from a new and mysterious client at a local science lab, and that is for tomorrow on the Pipe Piper. I like that one. All right. Thanks for watching and or listening. We will see you then. Bye.